Okay, this is going to be our next part in our series called Pickett's Charge, and I'm historian Frank Patrick Marone Jr. We're going to take a look here at the Union side of Pickett's Charge. And we're going to start today here near the angle in the stone wall. Okay, I'm here at the high water mark in Gettysburg. More specifically, I'm at the angle of the wall near the copse of trees. And today, I'm going to talk about Sergeant Major William S. Stockton of the 71st Pennsylvania, also known as the California Regiment, and this group of rocks right here that have these cracks in them near the angle on the wall. It was here on July 3rd, 1863, between 2:45 and 3 in the afternoon, that Stockton and his comrades from the 71st Pennsylvania Regiment clashed with Armistead's brigade here at the angle on the wall. Now, some of the men of the 71st Pennsylvania Volunteers at this point in the battle, when Armistead and his troops began to cross over this wall, some of those Union troops began to scatter to the rear and had to be revived by General Alexander Webb. However, a small squad of troops that were here at the angle with William Stockton stayed here and fought with the Confederates from Armistead's brigade. Now, at this point in the battle, other regiments had been rushed forward to the wall, including the 72nd Pennsylvania, which monument you see there, and of course the obelisk of the 69th, who had been there all along. As these Confederate troops came across these fields that we're looking at right now, also known as Pickett's Charge, they crashed into the wall here at the angle where the 71st Pennsylvania was placed. At some point, Armistead's troops actually scaled the wall and began to take prisoners, in which was Sergeant Major William Stockton and a few privates from the 71st Pennsylvania. They were stood right here where these rocks are today with these cracks in them. Today we know these as the Stockton Rock. And these troops were asked to head to the rear as prisoners, but pretended that they didn't hear or just plain outright refused. And they stood there. Stockton had a plan. He figured that if he waited long enough without going to the rear, that eventually Union soldiers would come up into this area, and if that is the case, he could make a break for it. And that is exactly what happened. The troops that Alexander Webb revived came back to the wall, and when Stockton and his men seen that, they broke to the rear, weaponless, and headed to the rear, before turning around and coming back here without weapons. Stockton would then return to the spot where he and his men had been prisoners moments before and take prisoners from Armistead's brigade. This has been the Stockton Rock here on Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours, and I am historian Frank Patrick Marone Jr. Okay, and now we are looking at the marker for Brigadier General Lewis Armistead, who was able to cross over the wall and make it to this point here today near where the marker sits. And of course, in the distance, you can see the copse of trees. And again, here is the marker for General Armistead, where he was mortally wounded. In the distance behind the monument, we can zoom in and you can actually see the Corduri farm. They're just beyond the monument to the 72nd Pennsylvania Volunteers there. Now, again,
Armistead is mortally wounded here at this spot, and then he is actually taken to the George Spangler farm. There, about a mile in the distance, you can see the Virginia Monument, in which General Robert Edward Lee watched Pickett's charge on July 3rd of 1863. And then right there in front of us, the marker to the 71st Pennsylvania and the angle at the wall. So again, this is our next part here in our Pickett's Charge series, and it's the wounding spot of Brigadier General Louis Armistead. And finally, we're going to look here at Cushing's battery. Now, around 1 o'clock, a sharp report of 2 Southern cannons alerted the men of Cushing's battery. Almost immediately, the ground shook with the roar of over 140 cannon, and the air came alive in a storm of exploding shells. It was a cannonade meant to destroy the Union guns and positions here at the high water mark. It would then be charged by 2.5 divisions of Southern infantry under the command of General George E. Pickett. Now, the shock of the barrage started the battery's men scrambling for cover while the horses pulled and strained against their harnesses. Through the dust and smoke raced the young lieutenant, Alexander Cushing. He was barking orders to his gunners to get to their posts, and within minutes his battery was in action. The cannonade left his battery in shambles. He received permission from Union General Alexander Webb to move his battery toward the wall and the angle. Pickett's division would then cross the Emmitsburg Road and make their way into this area. Determined to fight to the last, Cushing personally directed every shot as his crew loaded and prepared the weapons for the next round. They switched to double canister, and Cushing could see how the Confederates, less than 100 yards away, would go right up to the muzzle of his guns. Grasping the lanyard that fired the gun, he shouted above the din to Sergeant Frederick Fugger, who was standing nearby, and he said, "I will give them one more shot." Just seconds later, a Confederate bullet struck him through the mouth, killing him instantly. His lifeless body tumbled over the gun trail. Lieutenant Alonzo Cushing died a hero's death and was later buried with full military honors at his alma mater, West Point Military Academy. Between the guns here is a simple stone marker that was dedicated to Lieutenant Cushing, that was placed there by his family, former officers, and friends from the 71st Pennsylvania in 1887. He was posthumously ordered and given the Medal of Honor in 2010 by President Barack Obama. So this has been our next part in our series here on Pickett's Charge on Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours. And I am your historian, Frank Patrick Marone, Jr.